Hello and welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Wisdom Podcast. I am your host, Janet Sandberg from janetsandberg.com. I am a soul interpreter, divine channel, Reiki master teacher, intuitive coach and healer, and advocate for mental health and suicide awareness. I have 35 years of expertise in healing and coaching. I help you move from chaos and confusion to clarity and confidence by connecting you to your soul's passion and wisdom. Today, we are joined by the amazing Carleigh Burns. Carleigh, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
I'm very excited to hear your story. But let's just start by having you introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So, I am a holistic mental wellness coach who empowers mental warriors to overcome anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder without using medication.
Woo!
I know this is possible because I have done exactly that myself, and it is my life's mission to show the world that true healing is available to everybody.
Absolutely. It sure is. So let's hear your story about, how where you were, where you are now, how you did it. If you want to divulge your secrets. Let's go back to the beginning. What was life like? What was going on when things were really terrible and you thought that you probably didn't want to hang around?
So my mental health journey began at a very young age. I grew up in a household where my father was undiagnosed with bipolar,
Mm,
and he and I didn't get along while I was growing up. And I can talk about this openly because we've since mended our relationship, which is really beautiful. But
amazing.
as a young girl, I didn't really receive that love from my dad that I always was seeking. And I also was undiagnosed with quite a few mental illnesses, I put in quotes, that I was struggling with and had no idea. So when I was 12 years old, I actually planned on ending my life. And it was something that I thought about every day for quite a few months.
Wow.
And I'm so grateful that I never acted on it.
Hmm.
But it was very real at that time, that it was what I intended to do. And I also didn't know that wasn't normal until years later when I was studying psychology in university and learned about the statistics of how many people actually think about it, how many people plan to do it, how many people attempt. And I was like, whoa, it's actually quite a small percentage of people that plan to do that. I didn't know that wasn't normal when I was going through it. I just thought, life sucks and I don't want to be here anymore. From there, I don't remember the exact turning point where I decided I wouldn't do it, but I know that I held on to my means until I had left for university and come home for Christmas and found them and found these letters I had written and all this stuff. And I was
Oh
like,
my gosh.
whoa, it's time to have a big releasing ceremony and burn all of this. That's
Yeah.
never gonna happen, thankfully. But yeah, it was always an option in my mind. And from that point, when I was 12, I still struggled with depression and anxiety throughout my entire teenage years. They kind of morphed into disordered eating and substance abuse and just this really deep insecurity and lack of self-love that I felt I had to really compensate for and seek validation and external love because I wasn't receiving it from myself and I wasn't
Mhm.
receiving it from my father. So I used to just have such a deep insecurity that I wouldn't leave my house without spending 2 hours in the morning washing, conditioning, blow drying, straightening my hair and putting on a full face of makeup and, wearing really promiscuous clothing. And felt like I really had to put on this look to be accepted because I so
Mhm.
struggled with my own internal acceptance and love. So that went on for a little while, as a young teenager, which I think a lot of people experience that to some degree, but there's varying levels of extremism in that regard. And I unfortunately took it quite far because of my deep insecurities and that anxiety that was within me. And when I was 17, about to move across the country for university, I was just about to graduate high school. My dad was in the darkest place that he had ever been.
Mm.
And he finally received his diagnosis of bipolar disorder. And this was the first time that anyone in our household had ever spoken about mental health. It was
Right.
never, we were never aware of anything into that point. And it's like, I had struggled with suicidality, but again, I didn't know it wasn't normal. And I
Well,
had struggled with disordered eating, but my family didn't know. And
right.
what were you going to say?
I was gonna say, well, you wouldn't know that at 12, that it wasn't
Right.
normal.
Right. Yeah.
You don't have the life experience to know that this wasn't what other people did. And with nobody talking about it, you don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, that was very eye-opening, him receiving his diagnosis, and at first, it was like, "Okay, well, it's not that he was just this, like, angry, mean human. He was sick and struggling, and that is
Mhm.
a completely different perspective on what has happened, for the past 17 years of my life," kinda thing. And it also kind of ignited this fear in me because at this point, I was starting to become aware, "Okay, maybe what I've been struggling with was anxiety and was depression. And maybe those things do have labels and maybe they weren't totally normal or okay." But it wasn't until I actually went to university and pretty quickly some new friends that I had made were asking me like, "Do you have ADHD? Because, my brother has ADHD and it kind of seems like you might." And at that point I was like, "I don't know what's ADHD." Like
Right.
maybe, I don't know what you're talking about. So I go to a walk-in clinic. Nothing I would recommend to someone who's seeking mental health advice. It was
No,
a very
no.
unpleasant experience for me, but I go to this walk-in clinic at a GP I'd never been to before, and I say, "I think I have ADHD." And they go, "Cool, here's this, like, survey put out for us." And they gave me 3. They gave me 1 for ADHD, 1 for anxiety, 1 for depression, and I tested positive for all 3. And I remember filling out this ADHD form, and this was something so new on my radar. So I wasn't expecting anything from it. I filled out this form, and the boxes range from white to dark blue, and they go never, rarely, sometimes, often, and always. And you
Mhm.
fill out the questions and put your tick in the box, and the boxes kind of range in color and it shifts for each question. And I remember reading over the questionnaire, and every single one of my ticks was in a dark blue box. And I look at this thing and I'm like, this looks like I'm cheating. Like, there's no way that I answered
I
this
really want a
truthfully. So I go
diagnosis.
back. Yeah, I was like, there's no way. Like, surely I can change some things here. So I read it over, and there was nothing that I could honestly change. And I just started crying in the doctor's office. And the doctor comes back in and he's like, "It's totally fine. Like, this is normal, and we'll give you some medication and you're going to be sweet." And I was just there like, whoa, I am mentally ill and I have this diagnosis now, and I have to walk around with this label on my forehead that says that I'm disordered and disabled, and this doesn't feel okay. And what was even more scary was because my dad had just received his diagnosis of bipolar, and because we didn't get along when I was growing up, and I had this idea that he was this like angry monster, essentially, this diagnosis ignited a fear in me that I might also have bipolar disorder
Yeah,
and that I might, become this angry monster to my children, and that I might have to take medication every day for the rest of my life just to feel stable. Receiving that diagnosis was actually really hard for me to swallow. And it
mhm.
became the thing that I would cry about when I drank too much, because I was just so afraid of, the potential within my own mind. I liken it to what Elsa went through in Frozen, that she was so afraid of her power that she kind of pretended it wasn't there and didn't tell anybody about
Mhm.
it and really like closed off about it and was just overcome by fear. And I'm really grateful that because I was in university at the time, I had access to amazing supports, and I
Mhm.
got to actually see an ADHD coach. He was my
Oh,
first experience with coaching, and he really helped me to understand how my brain works and how it's different to a neurotypical human, but I can learn to make certain tweaks and adjustments in the ways that I study, in the ways that I arrange my day so that I can work with my specific mind.
yep,
So that was super helpful and really helped me to kind of learn to accept my diagnosis of ADHD as somewhat of a superpower instead of as this big scary
absolutely it
thing.
is.
But still, I had this looming fear. And about a year and a half later, I was 19 years old and just about to head to New Zealand on exchange. It was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me. All I ever wanted to do as a kid was travel, and I had never been out of North America. So to go on this trip was like, yeah, the best thing I could ever dream of doing. And a few days before I left, about a week before I left, this triggered my first and only episode of mania. And at first, I actually really enjoyed it. At first, it was like, I didn't need to sleep. I didn't need to eat. I had this like abundance of energy and just wanted to be up all night and then go watch the sunrise. And it's like the middle of summer in Vancouver where I was living at the time. I really enjoyed it. Everything was just too good to be true and was magical. And then it got to the point where it became overwhelming. And it was like this abundance of energy flowing through me. I couldn't have a conversation because I was speaking so fast. And I speak fast anyways. You can tell right now, but I was speaking so fast, people actually couldn't understand me and I couldn't slow down and I couldn't stand still because my body was just shaking and I kept crying, but not because I was upset, just because this like overwhelming energy was trying to pour out of me. So it got to the point where I'm at my last shift at work and I'm calling my dad and I'm saying, I don't know what to do. I'm struggling to talk to customers right now. And I keep running outside to cry because I just need to have these releases. And he basically was like, Carleigh, if you can't make it through the day at work, you need to go see a doctor. And I was like, okay, you're right. I need to go to the hospital right now because maybe I'm
I
not
need to
okay.
leave.
Yes, I should not be here anymore. So I did, and I went to the doctor or to the hospital and was really beautifully received. The psychiatrist right away was basically like, I can tell you're manic right now, but I don't want to give you a diagnosis that's going to last the rest of your life when I've only known you for, a couple of hours. And I was like, thank you. I actually really appreciate that. But at the same time, this episode of mania did confirm that I do have bipolar disorder.
Right.
And it was like I had just faced my biggest fear in the world and I was absolutely fine. And yes, it was scary and it was challenging and I needed to ask for help, but I realized I've already seen as dark as it gets back when I was 12 years old and I've
Yeah.
never been back to that place. I've now seen as high as it gets and I'm functional and rational enough to say, okay, I don't want to do anything that I'm going to regret, so I'm going to look for help in this moment.
Right.
So I kind of realized that all I need to do is figure out how to keep myself level and in the middle. And I was offered prescription medication and I said, thank you. I'm going to try and figure this out on my own. And I know that it's an option if I want it.
Right.
I was in the hospital for about 7 hours. And then the come down that I felt was just horrible. I had intense migraine and ended up feeling like properly vomiting and being sick. The rest of that evening, anyways, the next day was the only day that I had given myself to pack my life up before heading to New Zealand. And I just was slumping around the house trying to put my bags together, like just really struggling after this manic come down because I had just used up all of my energy over the past few days and hadn't slept and hadn't eaten and was just really paying that price. So managed to get through that. But I now had this determination to really find a way to heal and to try and avoid pharmaceuticals if I could. I didn't know if it was really possible, but I did know that I was going to try everything I could before I opted for the medication route. So I went down to New Zealand, and because I had just faced my biggest fear in the world and found that I was absolutely fine, I became obsessed with pushing my comfort zone and facing my fears. And I started just doing all these things I had always wanted to do, but had always been afraid of. So, growing up in Canada, I never learned to ski because I was just so anxious about going on the school ski trips and what will people think of me and what if I'm bad at it and just all of these anxieties that would come up. So I never went. So I go to New Zealand and I'm like, all right, I'm going to learn to ski and started to do multi-day backpacking trips. I had never hiked in my life. I'd never camped at this point and just started doing all of these things I knew were going to be challenging and scary, but were going to push me in a really positive way. I started studying neuroscience. I was doing a double major in biology and psychology at the time already. And in New Zealand, they just had incredible options for neuroscience courses. So I was diving into my brain and learning about, combining psychology and neuroscience and applying those lessons to my life. So my lifestyle really changed a lot that year because I started being awake in the day and having a beautiful day and getting outside when the sun is up and pushing my body, and having a solid sleep at night instead of, you know, binge drinking until 4 in the morning at the bar with my friends and then sleeping until 2 p.m. the next day, which was my normal up until that point, which I think is very normalized in university, but
Yeah.
it's not a great culture. It's not very healthy for the mind or body. So making those shifts was really profound in my life. I ended up doing my yoga teacher training that year. And immediately following that, I shaved my head just because I knew that it was going to be uncomfortable and I wanted to face that
Wow.
fear. So just was really embracing my healing journey, my self-development was like, what else can I do to embrace anxiety and discomfort and learn to overcome it? I was down there for a year, returned home to Canada for my final couple of years of university. And I realized that as I maintained this routine of making sure that I was really caring for my body and mind, that was my number one priority. I hadn't fallen into another depressive episode and I hadn't experienced mania since that first time. So I realized it was totally possible for me to never need medication. And at this point, I would have been around, I think I graduated at 22 and realized that I had done it. It had been a few years now since I had really experienced any sort of high mental turbulence. Whereas my whole life before that, it was every year in and out of depressive episodes and, you know, struggling with anxiety, having that be the ruling thing over my life. Having come out of that and reflecting back and witnessing my dad's journey and how he was like 55, 57 maybe when he got diagnosed and struggled for years before that. I knew that it was my calling to show the world that this is truly possible. And it still took me a few years to actually step into that role. I
Yeah.
traveled for a while, came down to Australia and just was kind of doing my thing, thought maybe I need to go get my master's first and, you know, imposter syndrome and all of that. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, finally I realized that my life experience needs to be shared. And I do have this wisdom to share with others about how to make ultimately it's lifestyle shifts. It's mindset, it's self-care and it's lifestyle shifts that really can lead to deep, profound healing and mental shifts. Now I'm 27, I'll be 28 this year. So it's been what is that? It's been 8 years since my manic episode. You know, life still goes like this. And
Sure. Life is
having
always
bipolar just there's always fluctuations. Yeah. And having bipolar ultimately means that if a normal neurotypical human's fluctuations are kind of like this, mine are just a little bit bigger. And I
yeah.
have to learn to not let myself go too far in either direction, but with practiced self-awareness and learning the tools that are available to keep myself either grounded or to lift myself back up, I've managed to do exactly that. And it's still my priority every single day to maintain my mental wellness. But now it's also my priority to empower others to do exactly that as well.
Yes. Amazing. I love it. I was thinking when you were telling your story about going in and having the forms to fill out, it was sort of the same for me. Like I knew I was struggling. I knew that and I had depression on and off for most of my life, but when I finally was like I had actually ended up in the hospital for anxiety. This was during COVID, so like everything was crazy
Mhm.
anyways. And I was like, okay, if now it's affecting me physically now. So I guess I should go, get some help.
Maybe I should do something about it.
Exactly. Call a doctor. Never mind that I was also suicidal at the time, but that wasn't really an issue apparently to my brain. I was like, this is
Yeah.
just a thing. I'll get through it. But yeah, went to the doctor. They give me the forms and I fill them out. And it was kind of the same thing. It was like, oh, you have severe depression and moderate anxiety. And I was like, huh, how about that? Interesting.
Would you look?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, yeah, you just need someone else to tell you what is happening. And yeah, and it's the same, with ADHD and neuro um spicy people. it's often somebody
Yeah.
else who has the same condition. They're like, we're a lot alike.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Maybe there's something going on.
maybe there's something going on. So, yeah. But unfortunately, with like depression and anxiety, it doesn't always work that way, partly because we just don't talk about it, you know,
Yeah.
where we're not talking about it. And then I could be like, the same. Maybe you should, you know, consider that you might be depressed like a lot,
Yeah.
or maybe you should consider that it's anxiety. Maybe you should consider, these things, but we just don't talk about it enough where we can't
No, and
help each other that.
absolutely. And we're really good at masking as well. A lot of
Mm,
people, because everyone wants to be the happy person and to put on the face of like, yeah, I'm good. It's funny in our culture. I feel like whenever someone asks, how are you doing? Like, how are you? And it's just like a common, you pass someone on the street, how you going kind of thing. The immediate response is good. It's like you don't even think about it. And I
yeah.
remember my aunt, I was sick from home from school one time, and my aunt came over. I would have been probably, I don't know, 13 or 14, fairly young, definitely struggling with depression, but not talking about it. And she came over and asked, how are you doing? And my immediate response was good. And she was like, oh, really? Are you feeling better? And I was like, actually, I feel like crap. And I don't know why I just responded with an immediate, I'm doing good. But it was this like realization to me that, wow, I don't even think about it when someone asks me that
Mhm.
question. I just automatically am like, yeah, I'm good. All good. Nothing to
Yeah.
see here. Keep moving kind of thing, which I think a lot of people still do in our society. The thing about anxiety is that a lot of times people with anxiety are really driven to be high achievers because it's
Mhm.
like there's this overwhelming feeling of I have to do more, and when I achieve this thing the worry will go away, and I have to keep going, and it's not enough yet, so I keep going, and then they end up with like incredible accolades and really being on these pedestals, but actually they're there because they've been struggling and searching for that feeling of enoughness and contentment that is never going to come from an external source. It has to come from doing that work inside of you. But unfortunately, then no one would look at that person and say, maybe they're struggling with anxiety. They look at them and say, wow, they're so inspiring and incredible and have all this energy. But it's
Yeah.
like, well, where's the motivation really coming from, you know?
And that was it for me, which I learned later in life. I'd been a gifted
Mhm.
child when I was in elementary school, and so they teach you that you get these rewards, and that you're smart and you can achieve great things, and it all comes externally. And then at some point,
Mm.
that's just what you rely on, and then we all end up messed up as adults.
Spend the rest of our lives trying to heal from all those childhood wounds.
Yeah. Yeah, and even though, that's a great thing, like, to be gifted and to be really smart, and having the people around you wanting to challenge you and give you extra and live up to your potential and all of these things, and you just, you don't realize at a kid that we also have to fulfill ourselves and do things because we want to do them. And
Mhm.
yeah, we can still get straight A's or do the things, but because we want to, not because we're getting rewarded for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. That intrinsic reward is really the most important thing that a lot of people aren't taught to be motivated by.
Exactly. And that's also what you found with your little, not little, your big challenges that you gave yourself. Like, let's try these things that we haven't done before. And I
Mm.
think those things also is easier when you're in a different place, because everything else is already so different,
Yeah.
and you don't have your family around. You don't have the same friends who are like, why are you doing that? That's not what you usually do. You can do whatever you want and be whoever you want to be when you're in a new place, which does make it easier. But just the
Absolutely.
fact that you consciously doing these things to challenge yourself and be like, who else can I be? How else can I grow? What else can I do that is safe? Like, other people do it all the time, so it's probably also safe for me too. And just, yeah, keep challenging yourself in those ways over and over and over again. Amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you make a really good point that like I was in a totally new environment. It was like I had the opportunity to rewrite my story in a way and to be whoever I wanted to be. And I really found the impacts of that actually when I got home, and found that the friend group that I had had for the first couple years of university, because I went down in my third year, I wasn't into those same things anymore because
Mhm.
our connection was through using substances. And, we would pull all-nighters to finish our lab reports the day before they were due. And that wasn't the way that I wanted to live anymore. I wanted to go out on adventures and hang out in the park, while the sun was up, and finish my work on time. And it was just total lifestyle shift. So I actually also then needed to find a new group of friends that I resonated with more and that had my same values, which when you're very, true to yourself and honoring those values and practicing your hobbies and whatever it is that you're doing, and especially in university, that did come quite easily because I just got involved with certain clubs that I resonated with and then made friends quite effortlessly. And those are still my friends today, that of course most of them are in Canada, but we still keep in touch, which is so beautiful because those values have carried on into our
Mhm.
post uni adult lives, which is amazing. And so much of it was really learning to put myself into situations and circumstances and environments where I knew that I wasn't going to feel safe, but logically, rationally, I was safe. So it
Mhm.
was all about challenging my nervous system and putting myself into these situations where it was like, hey, logically, my mind knows that I'm safe. My body does not feel safe. So how can I learn to calm my nervous system and show myself that I am safe here? And that challenge has led me on such wild journeys. Like, part of the reason I came down to Australia in the first place was because I was really following what's called highlining, which is, so slacklining is walking on webbing, normally between two trees in a park.
Yep. Yep.
A lot of people have probably seen it. Highlining is slacklining, but up high. It's more like tightrope walking, but you're wearing a harness.
Mhm.
Logically, you're safe, but
Yep.
you're putting your body into these environments where, you're dangling hundreds of meters above the ground on a 1-inch piece of webbing. And at first, your nervous system is like, I am not safe. Get me
Right.
back on the ground. Like, this is not okay. But the whole challenge then is learning to calm yourself down, to be in your body, and to stand up and walk in this space that feels super uncomfortable, but is so good for your body and your mind. So, me being on this journey of like wanting to challenge myself and face my fears and push myself and learn what I'm capable of led me to highlining, which led me to come down to Australia, which led me to meeting my partner, who we've been together 3.5 years now, and, have shared life dreams and values that are just incredible. So it's really beautiful where that journey has taken me. And it was all because I decided I don't want to live in my comfortable misery anymore. Anxiety and depression was familiar and it was safe, and it felt okay to, spend so much of the day in bed and, miss lectures and then have to go and talk to my professors, getting extensions on projects or exams and just eating unhealthy food. And I was miserable, but it was familiar, and it was
Exactly.
okay to be miserable, And once I
Mhm.
decided this is not okay and I desire more out of life, everything shifted. And I'm so grateful for younger me for putting that effort in and deciding like enough is enough. I don't want to live on this roller coaster anymore. I want to find the joy in life that people talk about, and where is it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it doesn't just happen. You have to make an effort. You have to go find it. You have to live it every day. Because if you just let things come to you, if you let things happen, yeah, you stay in that comfortable misery. I love that.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. That's the whole thing with building a lifestyle around healing. It's really diving into every aspect of your life. And this is holistic healing. This is a holistic approach, is diving into every aspect and looking at what is actually contributing to my healing journey and what is potentially bringing me down and how can I make these tweaks. But it's not like, you focus on healing a month or a year and then you're done. Like, I still am living with bipolar every single day. And that means every single day, my priority is how can I work on healing my mind? And how am I doing? And how can I either help bring myself up or bring myself back down and keep myself in this level space? And where is my mindset? And how am I moving my body? And how is my sleep and my nutrition, and all of these things that are so important to be checking in with that a lot of us just kind of take for granted or don't recognize the true importance and impact that our lifestyle and our daily and hourly actions have on our overall health, but specifically on our mental health.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. If you could leave our listeners with one last piece of advice, what would you tell them?
To always be making the decision that is going to benefit you most tomorrow or
Ooh.
1 hour from now, but to act not based on how you're currently feeling, but based on how you want to feel an
I
hour
love
from now,
that.
a day from now, a week from now. Yeah.
Yeah. Powerful stuff. Thank you, Carleigh, so much for being here and sharing your story and your tips and tricks and challenges with us. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, Janet. It's my pleasure.
Thank you for listening. Remember that you are loved, you are worthy, you are valuable, you are meant for more, and that it really does get better. If you are in crisis, there are numbers that you can call or text to get the help that you need. That information for Canada and the US is in the description below each episode. If you are in immediate crisis, please call 911. We love you, and I hope you'll listen again.